Hello, my name is Josiah. This is a live recording conversation between me and Mark Sargent, recorded on March 6, 2024. We did it live on my YouTube channel. However, there was a lot of technical difficulties, and so this is the director's cut. I tried to keep as much of the conversation in it as possible, and I think Mark's only going to post the audio version of this, but if you want to watch the video, it's on my channel, Oil Swims, on YouTube. So, enjoy. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Oil Swims. Today I have the infamous Mark Sargent on the other side. Say hi, Mark.
Hello.
You hear me? That's awesome. So before we get started, a little introduction from Mark. We went at the Flat Earth meetup in Salt Lake City this weekend. It was awesome. And if you were there, you know it was awesome. If you weren't there, you missed out. And I think that you're going to post some videos on your channel about it.
Oh, already did.
You already have.
I did, yeah.
That's awesome. If you don't know who Mark Sargent is, he made the Flat Earth Clues 9 years ago now?
9 years ago, in February, 9 years, yeah.
So you went flat 2014 or so.
Officially the clues went online February of 2015. So, but I was looking into it in 2014, yeah.
So crazy. It's been that long. Basically, Mark Sargent is the author, producer of Flat Earth Clues, which is, you can listen to the whole audiobook on your YouTube channel. Is it on Audible as well? I think.
It's on Audible as well. You can get that version if you want, but it's also in segments and in various bootlegs on YouTube and other platforms.
So awesome. It's so good. If you haven't heard it, just listen to it. It's very convincing, and basically you ruined the life of someone who ruined my life. I'll get into that in a sec, but you were also a silent producer in the Netflix documentary Behind the Curve.
Yep.
And maybe you want to talk a bit about that in a sec, but you currently host a podcast every week with Karen B called Strange World, 7 p.m. Pacific on Tuesdays.
Yep.
And I listened to the one you posted last night, or part of it. It's like 3 hours long. All of them are pretty long, but I love listening while I'm like working on stuff and whatnot. So it's a good listen. Cool. It's entertaining.
Yeah, well, thanks.
It's fun.
Thanks.
It's fun.
We try to have fun.
Cool. So like I said, it's nice to, one of the people who had a big influence on my journey was Rob Skiba. And I remember listening to a presentation that Rob Skiba did called The Day Mark Sargent Ruined My Life. And so, like I said, it's nice to finally be talking to the person who ruined the life of someone who ruined my life.
Thank you. And by the way, Rob, rest in peace, Rob Skiba. His work will never be forgotten. And again, I highly recommend anybody from the biblical side. Hopefully that site will never be torn down, called testingtheglobe.com, where he called me up, when we were working with each other for different things in 2015 to 2016. Where he said, I've gone through the Bible with a fine-tooth comb, and it's absolutely flat. He goes, except for one verse, and that's what every pastor is going to hang on to and try to use it as veto power, which is Isaiah 40:22, he who sitteth upon the circle of the earth. He goes, I could knock that out of the park all day, because circle is not the same in Hebrew as ball or sphere or globe.
Right.
And I love the fact that Rob, because you remember, he was our veteran when we first started this out. He had been doing the public speaking tour for a number of years on biblical prophecy and all sorts of other stuff. And he had been working with Zen Garcia, and those two had created a lot of content. So when he got into this, he wasn't sure if he wanted to go all out. So he told people that he was 98% flat whenever he was talking to people. And by the way, when he came up with that slide, that whole April 15th, 2015, the day Mark Sargent ruined my life, that was insurance Don't think of it. Yeah, he was trying to be funny with it, but that was insurance because that way he could go on record and saying, if this thing goes south and flat Earth just crashes and burns, I can point to that guy, Mark Sargent,
his
and say,
fault.
yeah, it was totally him. He goes, I wasn't all the way in. It was partially his fault, and then he could back away. And it took him, oh God, like another year and a half before he finally said, all right, fine, I'm completely in. But he took a lot of hell.
I know how he feels because like cognitive dissonance is. I'm just talk about this real quick. From all, as far as I can tell, this is how it works. Initially, it's crazy, right? And then you realize, hey, the person you're talking to is not crazy. They're very reasonable, and everything's adding up, right? Everything's adding up.
Right.
It's It's not crazy. So they're not crazy. They're just a liar, or they're a shill, or something like that.
Right.
And then you realize, hey, they're actually pointing out lies, so they're not a liar. And then it's like, am I going to continue to follow this line through this dissonance, through this fog to the other side? Because like you talk about in the Flat Earth Clues, if you take the red pill, there's no going back. When you go flat, you never go back. Why? Because you have a new perspective and you can actually see what's actually on the other side. And you're like, oh, crap. Like,
Right.
oh, man.
And not just that, but and they talked about it in the movie Behind the Curve, which was the reason we have a 99% retention rate. Really, the reason is that I didn't convince the person to tear down the globe.
Right.
They tore it down on their own. And that's some of the most effective retention you could ever get, which is like, I didn't persuade you. You know, you convinced yourself to tear down the globe. And once you tore it down, how you gonna put it back together? You know, if you have a change of heart, because you spent all that time. It's one of the greatest things of flat Earth is once you tear it down, you've destroyed it so completely that you couldn't go back even if you wanted to. Which I know the comparison to the Matrix is very, very obvious. Which is once you're out of the Matrix, if you remember the movie that's now 25 years old,
It's that old now. It's crazy.
Yeah, I know. It was 1999. Where you can't get back into it, which is why Cypher, the betrayer in that movie, is like, make me, I don't want to remember anything, which I would disagree. It's like, no, you want to remember this. You want to go back and have some fun.
That's what I love about Flat Earth Clues is when you taught in the beginning, you warn people. You literally, you're like, if you keep tugging on this string, like there's a 99% retention rate in this community.
Yeah.
And if you can get through that dissonance, you keep pulling through that fog, through that brain fog, that dissonance, and you get to the other side, you can't go back. And it's a scary thing. So, well, what I would like to do is, if you're willing, I would like to get into, some of the story behind the curve.
I see what you did there, behind the curve.
Yeah.
Okay. So the origin of it was simple, which was there was... this happens a lot in the world of Hollywood, which is you'll get people that work at a studio. So they've got their day jobs, but these wannabe directors and wannabe producers, they got to start somewhere. So they try to do their own projects. They scrape together some money, and they try to do their own projects. And when you make something like that, you're not going to have a distributor, so you're going to have to make the film on your own, and then eventually put it through the film festival circuit. There's a lot of film festivals all over the country and in other countries, and so they came up with this idea. I don't even remember what started it, other than they've told, I've been told many times that I've been contacted because I put my real phone number and my email address out there, and I do. And people say, well, why you get interviewed more than other people, or why you get to do things? It's like, because people can find me. Media is lazy, all right? They're like anybody else.
Well, you dox yourself in the Flat Earth Clues, right?
Yeah. I dox myself in the Flat Earth Clues. I dox myself at the conference. Every description box of every video I've ever made was basically a dox. It's like, here's everything to know about. You can find me. You want to type in Mark's physical address, his phone number, all that stuff. It's in there. And the first Strange World episode I did, I doxed my criminal past. It was very obvious because they didn't want anyone coming back. It's like, oh my God, he used to make illegal fireworks in college. It's like, yeah, absolutely.
Everybody
it's a great story.
Well, not like you.
But not many people. Yeah, not many people had multiple federal raids. And if this had been later down the road, I probably wouldn't be talking.
So you got rocketry in your past, so that's good.
Yeah. There was that. So anyway, these guys called me, and the director specifically, he goes, "Hey, can I fly up to Seattle and can I talk to you and see what we're thinking of doing this?" I said, "Yeah, sure." And we met at a pizza parlor in Langley on Whidbey Island, and we talked for a little while. And I kind of gave my little fireworks story. Again, full disclosure, because producers will ask you that. They'll say, "Are there any skeletons in your closet in case something happens?" And he's like, "You know what? I got a camera in the car right now. Let's shoot some test stuff." And we shot a little bit in Langley, and then we did the beach shot, which was shortly after, and that was what they used for the opening of the movie. And through that, it kind of expanded, which was like, okay, who can we get into this? And I recommended some people. I recommended Bob and Jaron and Patricia, and Nathan Thompson was kind of an odd little choice, which they picked up on. Because he was so eccentric, and I think, yeah, sure, why not? David Weiss hadn't been fully up to speed yet, so he probably in hindsight was like glad he wasn't in it. And of course, Chris Pontius, who made the models, which have been around. And between all those, it's like, oh yeah, we've got pretty much our documentary structure laid out. And so for the next 7 months, we shot off and on with different things. They took me down to the 2017 eclipse, which was down in Oregon when it was going from Oregon all the way to South Carolina, diagonal from west to east. And went to Patricia's. We shot there for a little bit down in Houston, went to the Space Center. That was kind of fun. And I knew they were kind of making me out to be the protagonist of this. It's like, okay, we're going to carry Mark through the entire thing, and then other people, as some documentary things go, and then everybody's going to meet up at the big conference in Raleigh, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And they missed some of the controversy. I'll give you a couple things. The first conference. The conferences were supposed to be co-sponsored by Robbie Davidson and Brian Mullen from Balls Out Physics, who was a structural engineer. And Brian Mullen was ousted from the Flat Earth community, not because of us, but because structural engineers were angry that he would have anything to do with it. So they said, we'll have your license pulled if you actually host this conference. And so Robbie Davidson took over from that point, for better or for worse. Then we shot everything down at the conference. And here's what I didn't know. It was supposed to be really just a human interest piece. They weren't people, you can say what you want, but they weren't scheduled to go against us. Right. Yes, they were going to interview a scientist. Yes, they were going to interview Scott Kelly, an astronaut. Yes, they were going to interview psychiatrists and crap like that and balance it out. But it was supposed to be kind of an open-ended thing like Ancient Aliens. And that changed when we got the conference, and they never told us, which was when there was a 12-year-old kid that was asking me questions during the Q&A panel that I was doing. They thought it was like, okay, what, because you didn't notice there were kids running around here? They thought, okay, now we're influencing kids. It's all fun and games until the kids are involved. So that's
until the kids believe in the flat Earth.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, we're not going to take you seriously. Oh, you're going to influence the youth? Oh, no, we can't have that. In fact, that's why they yelled at Kyrie Irving later. It's like, there's a lot of kids that look up to you. It's true. So unfortunately for us, they had already shot the movie, and they didn't have any money left to reshoot it. So they edited it as best they could against us. They went after Bob with the hot mic. They went after Jaron with the laser at the end. They went after Nathan Thompson, made him look crazier than he was. And then so they left Patricia alone, and Chris Pontius they left alone. But that's how they did. And what you guys don't know about that movie is it is, because it's an independent film with no distributors, again, you have to go to the film festival. So these guys didn't even think it was going to go anywhere. They thought, we're never even going to get into a film festival because, and they're right in that the odds are stacked against them. Like the Toronto Film Festival, where we premiered, there were 3,000 film submissions. Most people don't know that 99% of the movies made out there you're never going to see in your life for various reasons. They just don't make the cut. Mm-hmm. They don't resonate. And it's probably good that you didn't watch them because the cream usually rises to the top. And out of those 3,000 submissions, they only pick 100 to show up at the film festival. Now, those 100, there's only 10 that get to be considered standouts. We got into every film festival that we applied to.
Wow.
And we were always in the top 10. Always. Now, we didn't win any awards, but it didn't really matter. Of course, why wouldn't you? I mean, come on. Back then, a flat Earth independent film's never been done before. Right. It was a guarantee.
Well, then I heard you say people thought that you guys were actors.
Oh my God, yeah. They were And I didn't, and I knew this because I sat in some of the film festivals
Yeah.
that were in various parts of the country. You know, I came in and tried to hide myself so nobody recognized me. And what was happening was, because remember, Flat Earth was so alien to people that they were watching it. And for the first 20, 30 minutes of the film, they thought it was a fake movie.
Yeah.
They thought it was what's known as docu-fiction, where you're playing it like it's real, but everybody plays it, a fake documentary movie.
Right.
And the great story that the producers told me, because they had fun with this, a lot of the independent filmmakers, they know each other. It's kind of like garage bands. They all know each other until somebody breaks out, and then you never see him again. Right? It's like somebody gets a major studio deal, and then it's like, hey, everybody wants to be their friend, and nobody can reach them. So they handed the movie off with no context, and one of the editors that they knew that knew nothing, and he watched it, and they didn't give him any context, and he's going, "Wow, you guys have been holding out on me." It's like, why? It's like, where did you get the money for this movie? And he's like, what are you talking about? It's like, well, how much salary did you have to pay for all those damn actors? Because they played it so straight, and they just dropped it on him. They go, no, man, there were no actors in this movie. It was absolutely real. And the guy just flipped out. He's going, whoa, that Raleigh conference, all those people, that was completely legit. And it's like, dude, we were there for 3 days. It was absolutely legit. And, he just, pupils dilated. He was like, what is happening? And that was the same effect with all the studio audiences, which was after about the 30-minute mark, everything, for whatever reason, I really should look into it more and see when the exact moment was. But I watched people around the audience like nudge each other, going, dude, I don't think this is fake. I think this is actually happening. And it was interesting, but also scared them, because it's like, wait, there's something really weird on the internet, and I know nothing about it. And and especially like when they did the celebrity montage, where all these celebrities were talking about it in one fashion or another, and they're like, what in the so they thought it was fake, and I didn't blame them, but it worked in our favor.
It's so foreign. Yeah, well, it got the word out that there's this thing. There's this thing called Flat Earth, and that people actually believe it. And like I said, the initial response is, that's crazy.
That was the angle they took, like with Nathan Thompson, the guy that could juggle, ping pong balls on hammers, that sort of thing, where he was so eccentric that they used him as kind of like the plucky comic release valve. It's like, okay, well, this guy is obviously out there. But the rest of them, I mean, come on, Patricia came off really, really smooth. I thought I came off pretty good. Bob is an incredibly intelligent guy. Jaron came off good. Everybody came off good. And in fact, there was a little secret, I'll tell you, I don't say this very often, where the producers had this guilty pleasure, because they were at Chris Pontius's workshop for quite some time. Mm-hmm. And all the raw footage, you only saw 10, 15 minutes of it in the movie, if that. And they had hours and hours, and apparently, during their lunch breaks, they would just sit and watch raw footage of Chris Pontius make these models. Huh. And they're just intrigued. It was like watching Bob Ross paint.
Yeah.
Where you can watch Bob, right, and you're just sitting there just hypnotized, and they were eating their sandwiches watching Chris Pontius. I thought that was very flattering. As far as where I am in my journey, though, okay, let's just back up a few years before the pandemic started, for example. In 2019, we couldn't do anything wrong. We were bulletproof. I mean, we had done conferences in 7 countries. I was doing stuff all over the place. It was so awesome. I mean, I opened up the Gather Festival in Stockholm. I did a mobile commercial in Australia. I went to a festival in New Zealand and stuff like that. And I mean, we were even close to getting on The Amazing Race in for the 2020 season. That reality television show.
Oh yeah, I heard about that. That was that's so crazy.
Yeah, it was supposed to be Nathan Thompson and Matt Long. They were supposed to be in it per my recommendations. And granted, the producers and I did not get along because Let me back up one thing. When a producer calls you and says, "Oh, hey, we'd love you to be on the show. Can you watch season 31?" So you understand what we do. And I watched it, and like the great late Carrie Fisher said years ago, she goes, "You don't get it." She goes, "If it's on television, it's not real." Right?
Yeah.
There's no reality there at all. I mean, it's completely staged. They make it look more real because they use generic people instead of professional actors, but it's not real. And so when I was watching The Amazing Race, I noticed it was all scripted. I could see the plot holes all the way down the line. And so I went back to season one. And it's like, okay, has this been there since day freaking one? And it was. Season one was absolutely scripted. The Amazing Race is a travel show disguised as a game show.
Right.
So anyway, the point was we were doing so many fun things, and then 2020 started, and we were set to do our conference in Vegas in 2020, and then the borders closed, and then everything changed to where everything went internal. So at one point, yes, we could not do meetups or events because everyone was requiring masks or restaurants were closed. Like Vegas wouldn't even let us do a conference unless everybody wore a mask, and full well that's not going to fly. So for 3 years, everything went internal to where we were just making content and sharing information and notes. And then finally, when the mandates started getting pulled back recently, that's when we kind of stretched out again. Now, Karen B, in her defense, she was going to do conferences no matter what. She's like, screw this. And she lucked out and she found a venue on the East Coast, a Shriners Hall of all things. And people say, oh, wasn't that tied to the Masons? Like, yeah, it is. But you know what? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. If the Masons are willing to have us do conferences without a mask, we're totally there.
Yeah.
So she did those nonstop. And then when it came around last year to finally do the Vegas conference in 2023, she was on it and she did a fantastic job. So, yeah, since that, the short version of my 9-year journey, the documentary Behind the Curve was really fun. Endorsements were kind of fun. 3 books on Amazon. I don't know how many meetups. I lost count of the interviews. Not as many as David Weiss, but still a lot.
Do you think 2020 was the biggest year for the growth of the community?
No, 2019.
2019?
2020, everything just ground.
Okay.
Part of that story where I literally was... had my passports ready to do, and granted, I would have caught a lot of hell for this, but I've told people, it's like, look, if I can do a flat Earth, I don't care what it is. And I was going to do a McDonald's commercial in London, and we're up for Pancake Day because it's round and it's flat, and they were hyping it up.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, I'm totally in. I'm totally going to do this. And then I was supposed to leave in March of 2020, and then all of a sudden I get a phone call. It's like, oh yeah, borders are closed. The project's done, and we don't even know if it's gonna fire back up anytime soon. So 2019 wasn't a high watermark, but it was when we were running unchecked. The first 3 years, for example, 2015 through 2018, we were shamelessly promoted by like YouTube. People forget that the difference between YouTube and Netflix is quality of content. And they're still a big network, a big television. They make lifetimes worth of content every year, and no one's ever be able to get through all the stuff. But they were looking for a binge topic, so they promoted us. There's a wonderful documentary out there called The Social Dilemma.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, it's
that was
great.
before I believed that the Earth was the way it is. I don't even know how it is, but I know it's not a certain way. But yeah, right. Watching that, I was like, oh yeah, flat Earth. We need to censor that stuff.
Yeah. I understood it. Where 2018, and I don't think it's a coincidence, where summer of 2018, when I was tracking the numbers, I was always looking at the metrics because it was like we were really taking huge leaps and bounds to where the only people that were in front of us were major celebrities, like Justin Bieber and Katy Perry and Taylor Swift. And one of them was Donald Trump. And I didn't think we'd catch him. Remember, he was president at the time. And I didn't think we'd catch him until fall of 2018. And we caught him in the summer. And way earlier than I thought. And I made a video. It's out there on my channel called "Flat Earth Catches the President of the United States." Thought I'd take a little jab. And
they were like, "Oh, can't have that."
And shortly after that, they killed the scoreboard. And if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, there used to be a search results line in YouTube where you typed in whatever topic it was, tractor maintenance, and it would say search results equals a number. I mean, it's straight search engine 101. It's been there since a search engine has been invented decades ago. and they ripped it out of YouTube and they never put it back in for all topics forever. And it's like, what the
And
hell?
it's
Are you kidding me?
you think it's because of flat Earth?
Oh, it's absolutely because of flat
yeah.
Earth. Because I mean, shortly after that was that famous Senate hearing, which you can go out and look, where they were going to change some of the freedom or the censorship issues on YouTube. So they
Yeah.
banned three things. They banned false flags. You couldn't say that something where people died didn't happen. Medical misinformation, which was going to come into play a couple of years later, go figure. You couldn't push snake oil, but medical misinformation was then expanded to say that you could not contradict the CDC or the WHO in any way.
That was crazy.
Even now, you cannot come out and say the CDC is wrong about this. And then they also said, and nobody can accuse the 2020 election of being fake. Those three things were banned from YouTube. Now, they have since, because it's 2024, here we are 4 years later, since it's now election year, they retracted that because 2024, there's so many people going to be reflecting on 2020, they didn't want to kick that many people off. Because the filters, the automated metrics would have killed a lot of people. But the one thing they threw at the end wasn't something that was banned and said, oh yeah, by the way, we're going to recommend flat Earth less. It's like, what? Why would you even say that? And on top of it, that's when the very first, and I'm sure you've seen it, wiki line was added under a video title, category, which was us. So when you make a flat Earth video, if you're viewing it, there'll be a wiki entry underneath it, which is basically their response. It's like, oh, hey, before you read comments or do anything else, click on this wiki entry and we'll give you our professional opinion of what that topic is. So what happened was they said they were going to recommend flat Earth less. And by that, they meant they were going to monetize us less. And they weren't kidding. I remember specifically, we'll talk about Rob in a second here, where I started getting phone calls and messages from people. Like Jaron messaged me and said, you notice your monetization has been going down? Because we were actually doing pretty well. I mean, YouTube was paying us pretty well for what we were doing. And then Rob Skiba said the same thing. He's like, dude, I'm down like 70%. What's changed? And I go, we're not getting recommended in the sidebar. And this is tied to the French programmer. There was really one guy responsible for the algorithm of what is recommended for you. So on the sidebar where it says, we recommend these videos for you, there was one guy that was in charge of that. He was French. And they asked him, they said, so what is the deal? What determines what gets recommended for you? And you couldn't have blown the smile off my face with a blowtorch when he said what he did. Because remember, there's thousands of topics on YouTube, thousands.
Yeah.
And he mentions one, and he says, well, if the average person that gets into flat Earth for the first time watches 20 videos in a row, what do you think we're going to recommend? And that was exactly true. And that said it all, which was YouTube was looking for their binge-worthy series, and they found it. I mean, think of Netflix, for example, just putting out programming, and then all of a sudden something really takes off. Or, no, we'll do one better. The Walking Dead for AMC. AMC had no confidence in that at all. It's like, well, it's not like it's going to be a huge hit, right? Our little network. And Walking Dead is still, the spinoffs are still going years and years and years later. So that's what they did. They recommended us constantly to where people were complaining. After a while, it's like, why, no matter what topic? There was this wonderful video I put on my channel where I recorded, I grabbed this guy's video because every once in a while, someone will post something on YouTube where they'll say, hey, can you help me try to figure out how to change a carburetor out on a 53 Ford truck, right? And then people will respond to it. And this guy made a help video, which was, how can I turn off recommendations for me? Because no matter what I say, no, I don't want to see it to. He goes, it keeps popping up, and it's flat Earth. No matter what I search for, flat Earth just keeps showing up. And yeah, of course it was. YouTube, they knew their cash cow. We made them a lot of money for what we did. So for 3 years, they just put us out there. So I know, a lot of our people, I mean, for me, I understood it. For other people, they got kind of angry about it. Jaron was crying censorship, and other people were saying, oh, they're censoring. He's like, no, if they were censoring us, they'd kill the channels. they weren't hitting the brakes. They just took their foot off the gas.
Right.
And they thought, okay, well, maybe if we pay these guys less, because remember at that point we were already saturating the market. So I mean, there's so much. I mean, come on, now there's so much content. No flat Earth channel has been killed, with the exception of, and we can bring this up if you want. The only channel I know that got taken down multiple times was Eric Dubay.
Right.
And that's because his political views, his extracurricular stuff.
Yeah, the World War II and stuff.
Yeah, World War II. You know, a guy with a mustache. It's like, dude, you can't intersplice that with flat Earth, right?
Yeah.
You know, and I've said this. I can say this, right? It's like, you know, you can't go flat Earth, flat Earth, flat Earth. Adolf Hitler's the greatest guy ever. Flat Earth, flat Earth, flat Earth, flat Earth. Right? And it's not a subtle thing, right? It's like a 4-hour long video that you stick in there. About it's like, okay, and you know, and then he wonders, like, he's like, oh, they're censoring me. It's like, what did you think was going to happen? But he's back. I mean, I think he's back and with like 200,000 followers. These people are never going to walk away from him, ever.
Yeah, he's really interesting. He keeps, you know, he gets he gets destroyed, and then he comes back, and he's like a freaking phoenix over and over.
Yeah, and that's part of the mystique. Did you ever follow Owen Benjamin back in the day?
No.
Okay, so Owen Benjamin used to be a mainstream comedian, and then finally he got out of Hollywood and said, Hollywood's really weird, man. I'm going to move to Idaho. So he did. And I remember he came up with this great comparison of Eric to like a Hollywood party. He goes, you know what his name is to me? It's Savanier. And that's a made-up name, right? Savanier.
Right, yeah.
And it's like...
But you know who that is. He's the guy who's like in the back of the party, right? Who
the back of the party guy.
Oh, have you met Savanier?
Yeah, have you met? And he apparently heard Eric Dubay's name so many times. It's like, dude, you really got to listen to Eric Dubay.
Yeah.
To where by the time he goes, I really hope I don't meet him, because I'm sure it's going to be a huge letdown, because he's been talked up so much. And Eric really milked it. You know, I'm this yoga martial arts instructor from Thailand, and you know, very few people have ever met me in person. And
I would love to meet him. I mean, I like a lot of his videos are actually really, really good. So the guy you want to meet though, and I haven't, and I really wish I did in hindsight, was Matt Boylan, otherwise known as Math Powerland. Eric got a lot of intrigued people, but I'd never, and that's part of the movie, I'd never had so many producers mention Matt to me. To where the producers for Behind the Curve, for example, were just begging him to be reasonable and be in the movie without asking for demands, right? And he's so freaking out there. But like all artists, he was like the first one. So like you gotta be, in order for anything to take off, there has to be like one extremely eccentric person to like bring forth the energy to it, you know, and I feel like he's that kind of...
He was that guy, no question. I mean, that the reason why, and I took a little pride in it, which is why they used it in the movie, which was, look, I know Matt's story. I can tell it better than Matt. In fact, I can tell you the more truthful version of it, which was, did Matt work for NASA directly? Probably not. I mean, if anything, he may have made a couple images, but I think he made them as a subcontractor for a guy that worked at NASA. Where Matt lucked out, because, again, when he was doing that whole thing, he was probably mid-20s, right? And he had also taken a stint in Los Angeles. He's got an IMDb page. You can look him up. He's done bit parts in Hollywood. Plus, he was a painter out of Montreal, Canada. I mean, good-looking guy. And what I think happened was, because I've seen him in video stuff do projects, I think this guy from NASA who had this summer cabin in the Hamptons said, hey, can you paint this living room wall? And Matt's like, oh, I can do, the visionary. It's like, oh, I can do the most amazing thing on this wall. But he's not fast. So he was taking his time. You can't rush an artist. And then at one point, the guy wanted to throw a party. And it's like, you know what? You'd probably be more interesting than any of the NASA people I'm going to invite. So why don't you come along? And then it unfolds. But again, because Matt was in his mode, he didn't get it. Yeah. Even though, I mean, you've heard the story, and I won't necessarily go off on what it was. But
well, you can tell it because it's not for me. Yeah. Yeah, if you want to, Oh,
I can tell. I can. Okay. Yeah. I'll tell you the story. So the story goes that this guy who worked for NASA through a high-level I won't even call it an intellectual party. There was a lot of engineers there, but high brass, right? It's not like your average controller is going to be there. These are some higher up NASA mucky mucks. And since it's in the Hamptons, I can't remember if I think it was a holiday party. You had some storms and the power goes out.
Right.
All right, fine. So you're down to candles and wine. That's always a good recipe for everything. I mean, that's basically just people telling stories at that point. And people are telling the stories, and somebody was talking about Antarctica. And somebody just mentioned in passing, and of course we know so much more since then, was that they heard a rumor that GPS doesn't work in Antarctica. And another guy says, "Hey, Frank, you should send one of your teams down there to confirm that."
I think you cut out right there. What doesn't work?
GPS doesn't work in Antarctica. So so one of the high level guys says, "Hey Frank, if you send one of your teams down there, you can you will figure this out." And then a guy way up on the food chain chimes in. He goes, "Well, if he sends one of his teams that far, they're not coming back." And Matt, being 25-year-old ignorant, it's like, "Why do you mean we wouldn't come back? What is it, too cold or something?" And the guy goes, "No, it's flat." Right? Yeah. Matt, of course, like anybody, right? You don't even know how to process that, especially back in, oh my God, this story would have been 2010, something like that, maybe even earlier, maybe 2008. And so the guy then proceeds to get a piece of chalk from the owner and write on the granite floor, because it's a high-end Hampton house, just starts drawing out and talking about the world. Drawing out the continents, drawing out the borders. He's talking about thermal systems and how energy transfers from one area to another. And, and everyone like in the party is like nodding. It's like, yeah, like a bunch of people knew what the hell he was talking about. And at the end, Matt, and it would have been such a great thing to shoot for film. I mean, it would have been a brilliant scene when Matt said when he was done, when he was looking at some sort of elevated angle, he basically drew the UN flag.
Yeah.
And Matt still didn't get it. Because why would you? It doesn't make sense. I mean, come on, I've shown flat Earth to people all the time, and they don't think it's like wait a minute, that's a literal representation. It's like, yeah, most people you might as well be talking about a ship to the ancient Indians back in the day. The ones that couldn't even understand the ship in the harbor because they'd never seen one. It's like us, a weird alien craft landed, although we have more context now. So yeah, Matt processed it for like a couple years. And then finally, it kicked on. A light bulb went above his head, and he says, "Oh my God!" They were talking about it like it was literal. And then he starts making phone calls. He can't track down these people where they don't want to talk to him or whatever. And that started Matt's journey, which was and we only even have this story. Matt did. No offense to him, but he really only did one or two good videos. And the one video he did, which was an absolute standout, which they included a clip of it in the movie, was when his current girlfriend in Montreal, when he was living there, just sat him down, I think it was like on a Saturday or Sunday morning, sober, smart girl, because he was drunk a lot. He's, artist, the artist that takes substances. Go figure, right? And she sat him down on the couch and turned the camera on. She never got in frame, and she goes, tell the story, right? And he couldn't have been more coherent. And it's like, you could tell he wasn't acting. He was just kind of, he didn't like it that he was sober, I could tell, but it was in the morning. It's like, I'll start drinking in a while, but he told the story. It was very clear, and it had that spooky, tingly vibe to it. And it's like, yeah, there's more to this. There's something here. And he wasn't even the first video that I'd seen, but that one got me curious enough to start digging into other things, and then finally ended up doing my own research.
Right. Do you have a link to that video? Can you send it to me? I'll put it in the description of this video.
I will see if I can find it. The original.
I've never seen it, but I hear you talk about it, and I'm like, I've never seen it.
They use a short clip of it in Behind the Curve.
Okay.
I know that when you see Matt on the couch, that's the video. I will see if I can find it though. I should be able to get it.
And in case anyone's out there is wondering like what the UN flag looks like. It's what's the name of the map? The equidistant map.
The AE map, otherwise known as the azimuthal equidistant.
And it was made like 1,000 years ago, right?
Yeah, 1,000 years ago by a guy named Al-Biruni from the Middle East. And it's interesting because it's just technically a projection, meaning it's the globe, but in flat Earth form. That's what they tell you. But what's interesting is that it's an official projection, and in used by governments for various things. However, it's also identical to most of the flat Earth maps that are out there. And so it's like, okay, one is being used by the government, but one is crazy. And the AE map basically says that the North Pole, you basically take a globe and you squish it, from the North Pole down. And so the North Pole is the center of a dinner plate. The continents are splayed out around the outside edge, organically, by the way. I think that's really, really cool. And then the whole thing is encircled by an Antarctica. So Antarctica isn't this ice-covered continent at the bottom of the globe. It's about the same size of Australia, only with snow. It surrounds the entire thing. The only continent that doesn't make sense is Antarctica. Antarctica would be this giant ring-like continent that encircles the whole place, unless there's openings somewhere. By the way, on that point, I want to bring this up because I don't get a chance to do this very often. I just remembered, which is if you want to do some weird stuff, look at the Mercator map or even the Gauss-Peter map, but definitely the Mercator map, the one that's in classrooms, pulled down for the blackboard. And that is, in that map, remember, which should represent the globe because, the North Pole's up here and the South Pole's down there. All the pointy bits point in one direction. Meaning for everything from the Baja of California to the boot of Italy, everything points down. And you're thinking, oh, that isn't so strange. It's like, really? Turn that map upside down and then take a look at it again. Then everything points up, and it really, really looks alien. And what I mean by that is it doesn't make sense. The odds are completely against it. You're telling me that no continents on the globe point down at all? Nothing. Not a single piece of land. Everything points down. Nothing points up. But when you look at it on the AE map, everything points out organically, in this lovely splay pattern. And it's like, yeah, that makes more sense. It's become very apparent to us over at least the last 3-4 years that they originally took the flat Earth map and stretched it around the globe. That's how they made it. That's how they made the globe. Now, did they have help from an ancient civilization or the divine? I don't know. Possibly somebody had to inspire them.
All right. So I just want to ask you real quick because it's like, okay, so obviously when we're talking about the all the dynamics that happen within the terrarium of sorts that you were talking about with Matt Boylan talking to the NASA executives and stuff, they're describing how it all functions and stuff, and it sounds crazy. I mean, this is the initial, this is the initial response that what people are going to have is like, really, flat Earth is crazy. Like we know it's a globe. Right, we know that. But
why do you know it's a globe? Exactly. I love using the quote from George Orwell from 1946, where George Orwell, who wrote 1984, a fairly influential book, and he was talking about the credibility of science and how people just believe whatever science tells them, no matter what it is. Again, we've shown it. That's why I did the video called "The Code of Credibility." And we've tested it ourselves. It's like you could go and try to hand out flyers in the corner of Los Angeles, anywhere you wanted, and people would just ignore you. You put on a lab coat and hold a clipboard, people will walk up to you and talk to you without even nothing. They will find you. It's like, hey man, what are you doing? What's up? You're a smart person. I want to talk to you. So I'm sorry. Where was I going with that? What was the thing?
How do people know this isn't crazy? So what I would say is
it's a globe. So wait. So George Orwell, when he said everybody believes science no matter what. So if you walk up to somebody in the sidewalk and he said this, and you ask them, how do you know it's a globe? They all said what you just did, which was it's a globe. Of course, we know it is a globe. And then he pushed it, and he goes, yeah. How do you know? And you got to remember, NASA wasn't even founded until 1958, right? 12 years later. So how did everybody walking around know in 1946 that it was a globe? There was no spaceships. There was no NASA. There was no nothing. Well, how'd you know? You barely had radio. Television wouldn't even happen for a while. How'd you know? It's not that you know, it's you were told. Your family, your father was told, his father, and going back farther than your own family tree. And that's when people start, and he said that's when people start getting angry because they realize for a lot of the things in our world, we believe, we defer to higher authority. That person is smarter than me. He made an opinion. I'm going to believe that opinion because I'm either too lazy or I just, I figure that I'm never going to attain his intellectual prowess. Therefore, I'm going to believe whatever it is. And that applies to all sorts of fun stuff. But with the globe, yes, absolutely right. Which is why, of course, flat Earth is crazy. Why? Because you've been told your whole life, and everybody you've ever known has been told their whole life it's a globe.
Right.
It's been sitting in your classroom for at least 12 years until you graduated from high school.
And that worked.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, CIA pays top dollar for that sort of conditioning.
The crazy thing about it, too, is that all observable evidence shows that everything's revolving around us. So like Edwin Hubble in 1927, he looked up to the sky and he said, oh, crap, everything looks like it. That's where he came up with the red shift, blue shift thing, where we're like an ant on a balloon or whatever. Everything's expanding. Right. The problem with that is that the cosmological horizon, those stars that, because no new stars appear in our sky, they're just traveling far as fast now. They have to keep changing their story because of flat earthers. Right? If you've noticed that the narrative on space has changed a lot in the last few years, I think it's because of the flat earth movement. Because flat earthers are like, wait, what about this? And they have to come up with an answer. Oh, now these stars are traveling 7 to 8 times the speed of light on the. It's like, what, really? That's so crazy. Because they have to be. They have to be traveling that far.
Yeah, and no parallax. That's the average. The reason why they've been able to get away with it for so many years is the average person, even though we've got wonderful technological, advances. I mean, granted, the future was kind of robbed for us, but probably for a good reason. We don't have flying cars. We don't have robot servants. We don't have ray guns. However, I will say this. Our technological, our communication stuff, that's top notch.
Oh, yeah.
That's stuff that even the Jetsons couldn't come up with. But at the same time, the average person, if you go through high school, you got to remember, math club, really small, right? Physics club, really small, and usually the same guys. Band, really big. And, football, really big. All sorts of groups are really, really big. The average person coming out of at least the American education system, not so smart. So when you're talking about things like redshift, blue shift, or, lack of parallax, people don't even understand, like David Weiss has pointed out many, many times, just the raw numbers from space absolutely blow over the head of most people. The fact that, you have to measure the speed of light per second, because even if you take it up per minute, it becomes ridiculous. And, we have nothing to compare it to. But the parallax thing, for anybody listening, is if you've got stars, and hopefully some of you know some of this, if the closest star is 4 light years away, but we have stuff that's 10,000 light years away or 100,000 light years away, then you should see parallax. So.
Let's get into a little bit. So, like, flat Earth clues, like, that's 9 years old now, right? 9 years. Yep. And when that came out, I didn't listen to it until like the last year, but when I listened to it, it's still incredibly relevant. And I was listening to it and I was like, wow, like, I love how you warn people at the beginning, like, don't do this. Yeah. Like, seriously, if you have a good life, if because once you go on the other side, you can't go back, like 99% retention rate. And then you get into all the clues. Do you want to get into some of these clues, right now? Do you have?
Sure. I can pull it up. Hang on. Let me pull up the playlist really quick.
Awesome. The story that, because you can watch NASA fails for hours and hours, like astronauts with harnesses and wires and using green screens, and you can watch that stuff forever. But the first question that people always ask is, but why? Why would they lie about space? And
the biggest thing for me, and I haven't, I'm by the way, thank you for bringing up the clues. It's always interesting for me to reflect on it because, one, my message really hasn't changed. I've tried to stay consistent, which is got to be some indication that I still have conviction for the original topic.
Yeah.
Which was, because when I researched this, I researched it for 9 months before I finally made the clues. And when I put them out again, it was a cry for help more than anything, which is like, okay, I think I've got it figured out. but I'm not positive. And I knew that the internet hive mind misses nothing, the hive mind. And so that's why I initially put on all my contact information, because I wanted an academic. I wanted somebody with a master's or a PhD in a physical science, or God forbid, an astrophysicist to call me up and say, okay, here's why you're wrong. And convince me that I'm wrong, because I don't think I'm wrong anymore. After 9 months, I basically couldn't prove the globe in a court of law anymore. I mean, if I was sitting down there in front of a jury, I couldn't do it. So did I make a mistake? And as far as the question you just asked, why the lie, which is one of the bigger ones. Why lie about something like this? Why create NASA in 1958? Why keep this thing a secret? And first off, let's get the obvious out of the way. We had nothing to do with the building of this place, which is a huge indicator of why lie. No different than the pyramids. If you've ever been out there, everyone's heard of the pyramids in Egypt, outside of Cairo, just outside of Cairo. I mean, there's a Starbucks within like a golf shot from that place now. But you'd never know, because the angles, they make sure that the angles, there's nothing in front of the pyramids. But if you spun your camera around, it's just a freaking wall of city and commercialism and all this stuff. But they make it look, look, these pyramids are in the middle of the desert. It's like, no, they're not. There's roads going right up to them with huge parking lots. But the point there is we still to this day don't know who built the pyramids, right? There's not a single hieroglyph saying who built them. And my theory, and I really don't think it's theory, it's exactly what human nature is. I think somebody found them. I think the pharaohs found them 5,000 years ago in the middle of the desert, and they're like, there's no one around.
Yeah.
We made these things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Worship us. And come on, how powerful is that? And that continued for long. It's like, how long did it take you? 30 years. Well, that's an awfully round number. You want to tell us how you did it? Nope. And so they just did it. So imagine this. So the point of it is like, why hide it? It comes down to bad timing. And it sounds silly, but let me explain. We didn't even know. We didn't even have, again, remember, the stuff that we're talking, the high-tech stuff we're talking on right now, didn't even exist 30 years ago. Not even close, right? And if you go back 50 years ago, most of the planes were still flying, there's a lot of prop planes, not more props than jets. So we didn't even have the technological ability to explore everything until we created the internal combustion engine and then got pressurized aircraft, which started out in the early 1900s, but got better over time. So when we figured this out, best I can tell, is around 1960, give or take, right? The Antarctic Treaty was created in 1959, NASA was founded in 1958, but let's just round up to 1960.
You're saying that the governments discovered that the Earth was flat in 1960. Okay.
Yeah, if you're exploring, there's sections of the world, you remember back in 1940s and 1950, that we still hadn't explored, lots of them. And so if all of a sudden...
Admiral Byrd.
Admiral Byrd, if the guy that went to the North Pole in 1926... which is why the clue, the Byrd Wall, which was the second one I did, which actually did very well. The people kind of understood, and that was just dumb luck. Which was, there was a CBS affiliate that had him on a show called the Longines Chronoscope, which I mispronounced as Longines Chronoscope, because what the hell did I know? Apparently they made watches. I didn't know how to pronounce it, whatever. So he was on that, and he was talking about Antarctica and the Operation Deep Freeze, which hadn't even been named yet, which he was going to go in 1955, 56. And he was saying that the whole place was made out of money. There was a mountain range made out of coal, and I mean, he was giving oil and minerals. And at one point he said, and there's uranium. And the fact that he caught himself as I probably shouldn't have said that. And it's like, oh my God, he didn't even have handlers back then. But the handlers, I'm sure, listened to it after a while. It's like, oh yeah, we can't keep this guy doing. He's way too comfortable, and he lets things slip on camera. So they go down there for Operation Deep Freeze, and then all of a sudden Antarctica becomes off limits, and the 13 countries that were down there just couldn't get off the ice fast enough. And then in 1959, the Antarctic Treaty was put into place, and saying that no corporation from any country can set up shop there ever. And you remember, it was 1959. They said it's not even up for review until 2040. It's like, well, that's 80 freaking years. It's like, what treaty is that rock solid?
It's the longest standing treaty
it's the
on
only
the Earth.
unbroken treaty in the histories of
guarding
history of
penguins.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's weird. It's a military
And
ISO.
not only the part, it wasn't that the treaty was built; it's that you weren't even allowed to discuss the treaty.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the part that a lot of people don't know, that was my tipping point. For most people, it's long distance photography, or it's vacuum of space, or it's NASA something. No, for me, it was the Antarctic Treaty, because come on, especially in America, right? You know, our empire is built off greed and power and money. Right? We've done a lot of bad things
Right,
to
yeah.
create our empire. And yet that same empire isn't allowed to, or England or any of our allies, isn't even allowed to talk about Antarctica. Meaning,
Yeah.
when there are no articles saying, "Oh, Britain challenges the treaty." China, when you become an economic power, something is put, this paper is put in front of you, saying, "Yeah, you're not going to Antarctica." It's like, why? It doesn't matter. National security. Shut up. Sign it. And they do, right? And then that never changes.
Well, it was signed,
So-
was it 1959 it was signed, but the space programs were founded in 1958? Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Coincidentally?
Which, again, wasn't a coincidence. And I really love the fact that Rob Skiba picked up on that. He was the first one to really jump on it, which was NASA's founded in 1958. And then in 1959, we do high altitude atomic weapons. Doesn't matter if you believe in atomic weapons or not. The tests were still from something. And Russia and the United States are firing straight up.
Yeah.
All the tests for 4 years.
Dominique, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Fishbowl,
that
Dominique.
Fishbowl.
Yeah.
All the aerial stuff was firing up. And I knew exactly what it was. That is the typical guy thing, which is like, oh, here's a wall. Get the cannon. Let's see if we can bust through this thing. What do we have? What's a bigger cannon? And they just kept upping the stakes and and for 3 years, they tried. 4. Doesn't really matter, because Russia and the United States quit on exactly the same day. But during that time, they founded NASA, and then they announced the two things that were really the glaring ones. They announced the Van Allen radiation belts in 1959 and said that, oh yeah, it's super deadly up there. No one should ever go up there. And then they sealed off Antarctica in 1959. Exactly what I would do, which was, I tried to, if I can't improve on a particular conspiracy, I think it's real. I consider myself pretty clever that way, which was, okay, so you seal off the outer marker and the upper marker, same year. But to your question, why do it? And that is because they were afraid. Why keep it secret? Because they were afraid of what the population might do. By 1960, everything was pretty much what they wanted. World War II was long over. The United States was surging. I mean, we were the Camelot beacon on the, shining on the hill. We could do no wrong. And I talked about this recently, where I said they went for broke, which was they killed two birds with one stone. They said, look, everybody believes everything America says in the 1960s. We did. We could not do any wrong. And so they said, let's do what the Roman Empire couldn't. Let's say we went to the moon, right? Which is, are we going to the moon? Doesn't matter. We're just going to tell people we went to the moon. Can we fake it? Yeah, we can fake it. It'll be totally fine. And so they did. And they said we went to the moon multiple times. We're the only ones to even attempt it, by the way, even now, kicking the can down the road decades later. And again, they did it between that and the Antarctic Treaty and everything else. They sealed off the world because they were afraid of what the population might do. Meaning, you think, oh, well, if the people knew, it wouldn't be that big a deal. It's like, yeah, 1960 would have. Meaning, don't forget that 13 years earlier was Roswell. And Roswell was a nightmare publicly. I mean, people were freaking out. If you look up the newspaper headlines from what happened when they released that story out there.
The Death Star.
And it took the Pentagon days to find out. And was like, oh no, we're retracting this. Weather balloon, everybody. Weather balloon, you're the patsy. Weather balloon, shut up.
Yeah.
And so that's what they did. So 1960, it's like, I mean, that was just a stupid little UFO, which I think was real. Lovely TV movie, by the way, called Roswell with Kyle MacLachlan from the early Dune.
Yeah.
And so with this, it was like, do you really think, and I've asked journalists, it's like, really, you're going to release that story that the Earth is a snow globe? You're really going to do that in 1960? They weren't ready. Not even close.
Yeah.
To tell the general public. So they didn't. And again, because we didn't do it, all they had to do was keep the secret, right? All they had to do was keep Antarctica locked down, which works out for the most part because it's a horrible place to go to, and then militarize space, which they did for a long time. There were no private space companies for a long time. And then when the private space companies did come online, which were completely infiltrated by ex-NASA employees or current NASA employees, they made sure they were crashing on a regular basis. Blue Horizon, Google, Virgin Galactic.
Yeah, the last three have
Elon couldn't
tipped over,
blowing
right?
up stuff. He just blew up something recently.
Yeah.
Like, I'll give you a great example. I was doing a London interview, and it was one of the only times I was ever intimidated, which was a journalist named Piers Morgan over in London. And I thought for sure he was going to eat me alive because he destroys politicians on a regular basis. And I asked him, I go, really, would you drop that story? And he couldn't bring himself to do it. So what happened was, imagine this. Let's say you're at an Illuminati meeting. You know, it's a big long table, very badly lit. Everybody's smoking for some reason. I don't know why the evil, sinister people all smoke. You would think the tobacco industry would have something against that. Anyway, somebody says, well, okay, what could go wrong? Let's say in 1960. What would be so wrong if we told the general public? One is that the academics would be completely screwed up, meaning every university in every country would have to retool science, starting literally from the ground up. No play on words there. Meaning astrophysics and astronomy, that would have to be gutted, and you don't even know what to do. You don't even know those two are coming back. And then you have like geology and hydrology and archaeology. Anything with an ology has to be rebuilt because you have to rebuild the world model around it. Libraries would have to be emptied and then brought back, and then refilled, and that's not going to happen. So, that academically alone, and remember, that's every university in every country, and there's a lot of them out there. Just think of the American schools. Then you have economically, which is economically the world markets. So the world markets, as you guys know, are super, super twitchy, even though the stock markets right now in America are propped up to no end. Those would have to shut down before you even made those announcements, or make the announcement right after or shut down right after you make the announcements, because you don't know what it means. There are certain industries that would collapse, certain industries that would thrive. There would people that would be relocating to different parts of the world based on what you were doing. And last but not least, you have the religious side of things. And that's really the biggest one when it comes down to it. The 5 religious houses of the world. And you guys know these, which is Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. So you give those 5 religious houses leverage against science, and you're asking them to show restraint, right? These same religious houses that had to renounce the original snow globe model some centuries earlier. And not only that, but science has been building their foundations and beating people over the head with textbooks for the last 5 centuries. And you're asking him to not take revenge. That's an impossible task. Every church would say this. I don't care what church it is, would say, okay, so you were wrong about something really, really big and important. What else were you wrong about? Let's revisit it, shall we? I don't know. Carbon dating, evolution, the Big Bang, dark matter, quantum mechanics. Everything that you can think of that they've been laying down for a long time, hammering religion on its way. The religions wouldn't stop, and so science again will do, for the most part, anything it can to protect itself, like anybody else. So the institution has to stay alive. All right, with that, we are going to go to an intermission, I think, and I'm going to get a new link, and then when we come back, we'll get a few more questions and then go from there. This has been Oil Swims Live, and I'm your new host, Mark Sargent.
We're back. Okay, my mic was muted just there, so I just said it's hard to produce our own show and produce my own show and do the interview at the same time. And you have a producer. His name's Peanut. Is that correct?
Peanut Gallery. Yeah.
All right. So you were in the middle of telling the story about the Operation Dominique High Jump.
Right. Yeah, the atomic weapons program, for example, which the Americans were doing, was something that we instinctually would have done. The military is very ham-fisted, which is if they see a barrier they want to get through, that's what they're going to try to. Wouldn't you? I mean, there's an argument I used years ago. In fact, I put it in the clues, which was the wildlife preserve example, which is humans are very different compared to every other animal life form. You could put 100 buffalo in a 1,000-acre wild preserve with grass and water and fresh air, and put a fence around it. and they'd be perfectly fine. They're not going to care. Just walk through the fence, like, hey, there's a fence. Then they turn around and they're going to go back and eat their grass, right? You put a dozen people in that same 1,000-acre wildlife preserve, even though there's more than enough room for everybody to do whatever they want, they're only going to care about one thing, which is the wall. We're eternally curious about that. It's mysterious. Human beings love a mystery. And they'd walk up to the fence, like, why is this fence here? Why are we on this side of the fence? What's on the other side of the fence? Who built the fence? And have we angered the fence gods? And it's like, what shall we do? Shall we sacrifice things to the fence gods? Let's grab some of those buffalo. And then it just spirals from there. It's like, okay, when the world was turned from flat to a globe, if you're wondering why, that's the big reason why. You can't leave it a snow globe forever, because as the technology increases, people will start looking for the edge. Like any other animal, they'll at least probe it. Well, whether other animals don't care when they finally get there, we'd care. We'd be obsessed about it. So, so imagine this. Again, you could go into Google and type in ancient cosmology and click on images. You're only going to see one image, which is basically all these cultures drew the same thing. They drew an enclosed world.
Yeah.
All of them. And when they wrapped it around a globe, the genius of this plan was they made it seem, because it was spherical, that there was nowhere to go. There was no edge to go to. You could just do laps around it all day long like an ant on an orange. You're never going to find the edge because it's spherical. And again, because Antarctica is so hostile, it just screams go away. That's where they also lucked out, which was the outer rim of this place, which is so incredibly cold that ships, and by the way, every captain will tell you, oh yeah, icebergs are the scariest thing ever, right? And then you get to the Antarctic coastline, which is ice and snow and more snow. And the whole thing, I mean, most of it's a plateau at like 14,000 feet, which is twice the amount of the average person for altitude sickness. And then there's no animal life and no plant life. I mean, this place just screams go away, which would be, again, part of the brilliance of the design of this place is that whoever made it, it wasn't us, right? If it was an advanced civilization, it was God, didn't have to put up a big sign with skull and crossbones saying go away, right? It didn't have to put frost giants holding huge axes. And now your voice, I can't hear you anymore. So just so you know, the host is having some audio problems. He's going to be typing to me. However, his voice kicked out for some reason. So again, the design, here's why that makes Antarctica go so well. Antarctica is so hostile that it makes it seem like it was your decision to turn back. So if the icebergs didn't make you turn back, the ice wall, the 150-foot wall of snow would have made you turn back. Or when you got up there, you realized there was no food or plant life, so you also realize it's like, oh crap. It's like, it's like if whatever supplies they're going to keep us alive, that's all we've got. Because there's nothing to eat unless you really think you're going to hunt down all the penguins. And even if you ate those, I don't think they're probably pretty greasy. So what that means is eventually when you're done suffering on the ice, you're going to turn back and you'll think, well, it was my decision. You weren't forced away. Human beings hate that. If there was a big, giant golden door with padlocks on it, we just keep trying. We just keep trying for the door. But there is no door. There is no wall. There's nothing to go to, which is why Admiral Byrd and the United States Navy tried for 30 years to find some sort of outer marker. That's all they cared about when they were out there. They're just flying around. And then, they're not going to tell you, but it's pretty much what I think it is. They found the outer marker, some indication that there was some sort of edge to this place, some barrier. We call it the snow globe wall, whatever. And as soon as they found that, they realized the implications of it, which was, we can't let people down here. We can't let independent explorers. We can't let other countries, especially now that we have oil and gas companies. Because you're probably thinking, well, if there's oil, think of this real quick, which is the United States especially. We can, and we've all heard the stories. There's been movies and documentaries made up for years, which is if the oil and gas company wants to start fracking in your neighborhood tomorrow, they can make it happen. It's real easy. It's just money. And they've done it a lot. Every place they could frack in the United States, they've pretty much done at this point.
Yeah.
However, those same companies with unlimited amounts of financial resources, not only are they not setting up shop in Antarctica, which they would, but they're not even allowed to talk about it. Not even allowed to. I mean, come on, British Petroleum after the war, they needed the resources. Europe was rebuilding. And yet that company didn't run full page ads in the London Times saying how great it would be for British Petroleum to go down to Antarctica. And I know exactly why. They would just make one phone call to the head of whatever oil company it was. It's like, yeah, national security. You can't go down. The fact, all you have to do is contact the British government and have them contact British Petroleum and be like, national security, God and country, you can't go down there. And when you retire, you hand our business card over to someone else. And if you don't, that's okay. We're going to come visit them anyway. You don't get to go down there. And you can make up any reason you want. And that is an easy way to keep Antarctica off limits. The keeping the outer marker or the space, militarizing space, that's a little tougher. Because eventually the tech's going to keep ramping up and ramping up and ramping up. And eventually some of these companies, which remember, NASA is just a collection of parts. Right, so NASA doesn't make their own parts; they get it from McDonnell Douglas and Boeing and General Dynamics and guys like that, Lockheed Martin. And what you don't want is those companies going off on their own and doing their own thing, because they could team up with any sort of commercial thing. I mean, Lockheed Martin could team up with Doritos, Frito-Lay, and start shooting rockets. Well, you don't want that because those rockets aren't going anywhere; they're going to crash. And so you suppress as much as you can, sabotage as many rockets as you can. What, you think that Artemis 1, that fireworks display, you think that was an accident? Really? No. And then Artemis 1 again, trying to go around the moon, low-res footage and
they're
nothing.
They're afraid of us.
By the way, no stars.
They're
ever.
Afraid that we're going to critique their missions.
It's not going to happen. Not going to happen ever. All right, crazy. So the host is going to be typing me something. Yeah, he's never going to be able to solve this audio issue. It's okay. We've already got a lot in the can anyway, man. I can totally splice this into something. I'm sure you could too. But you got any final questions for me? They can hear me though. Who can hear you? The audience? Okay, well then type a question. I'll give you another 15. Type a question.
All right.
To the thing. What questions do you have? Maybe from chat. I'll see if I can do them rapid fire if you have any questions from chat. This is, by the way, very unusual because it's weird that they can hear you. Last few space launches. Okay, yeah, let's go into that really quick. So 3 things. Again, a couple things you have to look at. One is that no one has even tried to make a human landing on the moon since the Americans in 1972. There's supposedly, 5 launch-capable countries or organizations out there right now? Japan, Russia, China, the European Agency, and us. Well, now India, right? We'll throw in India. So 6. No one's even tried to do humans. No one's even attempted it. And honestly, the Americans shouldn't have done it either, because think how horrible that would be. Let's say, for example, one of the Apollo missions crashes, right? And people die. Well, then you've turned the moon into a giant headstone. Right, that just screams, which is why you'd never ever want to do this for real. It'd just be too damn dangerous. But as far as the last 3, for example, so the first one was, which was back at least 5 months ago, we'll say, was India. They said, "Oh, we landed a probe on the moon for the cost of like $75 million, which is absolutely ridiculous. You can't even buy half of a super yacht for $75 million, and that's just a boat." And yet they use 1994 computer graphics. And I'll do that one. 1994 computer graphics, and then to do touchdown, there were no images from the moon for India, and it was just absolutely. And yet everyone was cheering when they showed this little computer graphic thing land on the moon, which was some of the worst graphics I've ever seen. I was in the gaming industry. The second one was Japan. They tried to land a probe on the moon, and it crashed. Not hard enough to destroy it. Okay. And then it tipped over, and then they released their little ball probe, and in its last dying moments, it took a single shot of the probe and the sky behind it and beamed it back 250,000 miles to Earth. With what technology? With what power source? How did you even remotely do this? How? And then Odysseus, which was an American probe, which was NASA's going to take partial credit for, they crash as well. Then it tips over, supposedly, and didn't release a probe, and then took 2 shots, and yet even though the telemetry was completely wrong and they don't have the power to do it, again, power source to transmit HD video 250,000 miles. No, never, no way, no how. And sorry, the short answer before we get to where we live, which is, here's the big problem for them. with Artemis and everything moving forward. You're saying, why have they kicked this down the road for 50 something years? And they just keep kicking the can down the road. Artemis 2 isn't going to launch now until at least September of 25. I can guarantee you it's not going to launch September of 25. And the reason is because the internet and social media is too bored and too good at what they do. They microscope everything. I have said for years, if you tried to fake the space program, right? If you came to me with a dump truck full of $100 bills, hey, I just heard you. Yeah. Did you find out what it was?
Everyone can hear me now.
Yeah, I can hear you. So if you backed up with a dump truck full of money and said, hey, Mark, pretend I'm a director and say, can you fake the moon mission for us? Kind of like Stanley Kubrick back in the day. Even though it was $1 trillion, I'd be like, no, you absolutely, there's no way. And the reason why is production mistakes. The bigger the operation, the more production mistakes you are going to miss. And I'll use this before we get to the where do we live thing, which is, think about this. Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, famous movie, eventually won Best Picture. Big production, really, really big production, right?
Yeah,
Went through primary shooting, editing, the dailies, post-editing, special effects, right? The same pieces of film went through so many people's hands, right? Including the premiere.
Right.
Released in theaters, and the first theatrical cut, when the hobbits are leaving the Shire, there's a road in the upper right-hand corner of the screen and a white car driving through it.
Oh, yeah.
And you got to remember, and the reason was power of that was misdirection. Everybody's focused on the hobbits. Everyone's looking to the bottom left, bottom left, bottom left. Some guy in his popcorn drops a piece of popcorn. He looks up just because he's looking in the wrong part. It's like, hey, what's that doing there? Phone calls are made. Next thing you know, they have to recut the film and redistribute all the roles because of that one little mistake. Why is that relevant? If you tried to fake, and I know think tanks are going to listen to some of this. They listen to us a lot more than you might think. It's not delusions of grandeur. But you've heard me say this a lot, which is if you try to fake a human moon mission now, and it's not flawless, you are busted in a matter of hours. I mean, completely busted everywhere, because whatever's on the internet, it sticks. Good luck purging it from anywhere. You couldn't do anything live, which meant the whole thing would be fake. Your pre-records would have to be flawless, and all it takes is one guy to screw up one little thing. And we have seen these, their track record just on the ISS alone is abysmal. I mean, the hairspray alone is horrible. Not to mention the layering glitches, the harness glitches, the gravity glitches, just the general CGI glitches. Tons and tons and tons of mistakes.
The astronaut who almost drowned.
The fact that you're training in an underwater pool, right? Which is, and it's like, why do you train? Oh, because it gives us that floaty feeling. I'm just going, yeah, but that's the exact opposite of what you should be doing. You should be training in a vacuum chamber. But we can't, because the vacuum chamber would prove that the spacesuits don't work. A soft spacesuit cannot work in a vacuum chamber.
Exactly. That's the craziest thing. Like, you put an astronaut in a spacesuit in a vacuum chamber, it would not hold up.
No, there's no way. Anything, you guys, and you... Every object, you can look this up on YouTube all day long, or whatever platform you want. Anything, because people, science geeks have done this for years. You put anything in a vacuum chamber, it will detonate. That's a soccer ball, football, basketball, a can of soda, and that's metal, by the way. All sorts of things. They just eventually expand and blow up. There's only one thing I have ever seen that is not expanded in a vacuum.
Astronaut suit. And even though I have asked scientists for years, I said, explain it to me. And the reason, and then no one, I get crickets. The reason why I know it's absolutely fake is because I can't even come up with a fictional way of making that spacesuit work. Meaning where would the carbon dioxide go? Where does it? Oh, dude. What? Remember, this is not tethered to anything. It's a magic backpack. And even if you could tell me there was some microprocessor technology that you could counteract the vacuum, which you can't, tell me what you did in 1969 when everything was analog, right. and your battery power was terrible. And sorry, one more thing really fast before we get to the where we live thing. You want to look this up? And again, I'd love for a troll to send me this. If you know any scuba divers,
I've said this many times, which is scuba divers are notorious for one thing. They're always checking their air levels, always, because that's the only thing that matters. You're down there, you're checking that giant gauge that you're either holding or it's hanging off your wrist, and it's like how many minutes of air left do I have? Doing. You know what you never heard from the Apollo astronauts? You never heard them talk about how much air they had left, ever, ever. And you're saying, well, they had carbon scrubbers. It's like, really? They had carbon scrubbers because in submarines, carbon scrubbers are the size of this room.
Right.
Right. And they take immense amount of power. Right? So it's like, okay, so you're telling me that in a backpack you had carbon scrubbers, and if you could, then we'd have infant scuba technology. It would have filtered down to the civilian market. Not to mention, by the way, that what we're breathing in is 80% oxygen. There's 2 tanks on the back of scuba divers, one for nitrogen, one for oxygen. Where'd all the nitrogen go?
Right.
How'd you get all the nitrogen up there? And then how did you depressurize? And oh my God, it's just never, again, because the average person.
You can see the bubbles in space.
Yeah.
Some of those clips. It's crazy.
That was genius, which was let's create a replica of the ISS underwater, and then we'll just turn all the lights off, and then we can put green screens where we want. And I mean, that's movie technology, and we've been doing that for years. I'm going to blame James Cameron for some of that. He was one of the early guys that figured out you could do incredible underwater scenes by just. In fact, he didn't even have a place that you could turn off the lights. He filled the top layer with layers of small rubber balls, and it blocked out all the light. That's how they shot The Abyss. The Abyss looks like deep water. Yeah. And it's not. It's just a freaking swimming pool. It's not very deep at all.
Yeah.
If you've never seen it, 1989, The Abyss, I highly recommend.
And if you don't think they can fake the ISS, I mean, you can watch like The Big Bang Theory did it. There's actors.
Yeah, and that's just a television show. Yeah. Not to mention, really good special effects like Gravity.
What can you do with $70 million a day? And they even still suck. Like some of these videos that NASA releases, you're like, seriously? Like that is so crappy. Because I think the reason why is because if they release something super good, then you can critique it. But if it's blurry, then you can't.
Right. And they made a mistake, which was, unfortunately, because they're like with any Hollywood movie, there's a continuity issue. Whatever you shot in 1969, it has to match up with it. And so how they are getting away, by the way, lately with no stars in space. By the way, Artemis never showed any stars. The probes, Japan, India, Odysseus, never showed any stars. So again, trolls, if you're listening out there, why are there no stars in space? Now, you want to say, and I give you a pass on this, you want to say in 1969 it was because of exposure settings because they used film. Okay, that's fine. We don't use film anymore. It's all digital. Our cameras can do amazing thing in multiple filters simultaneously, recording to different devices simultaneously. In fact, camera-wise, there is no limit to what we can do. And yet, when they got to the moon, when Artemis got to the moon, 50 miles away, the footage was amazingly grainy and there were no stars. When are we going to see stars in space? And if the general public is like, oh, well, there are no stars in space. And by the way, please, trolls, come back and tell me, well, there's just no stars in space. It's like, really? Because I go outside right now and there's a whole bunch of stars. Tell me why the footage of me shooting the moon from here is better than a probe that's hovering 50 miles over the moon's surface. Unless, of course, it's not hovering over the moon's surface. Okay. To your second question, it's like, where are we? No, where we live? What is this place?
What is this Earth? What do you think?
Are living. I'll use a thing I was typing in chat for David Weiss's British interview that I was watching earlier before this, which was all the world's a stage. Shakespeare said that, and we are just players in it. That's flowery, but it's true. Now, I don't think that Shakespeare was a flat earther, but I think he kind of picked up on a few things, which was you are living in a building. A giant soundstage with walls and a floor and a ceiling and apparently a big thing of water in the middle of it with some islands, which we call continents. And it is been manufactured. It is absolutely... If you want to go down the virtual reality path, that's fine. But since we're in it, it really doesn't matter because once you're in it, everything appears real. So we're not outside it. So I can only speak inside of it. Are we... Okay, if you're living in a building... or a snow globe, or a planetarium, and that's really what it is, more than anything. I mean, it's a soundstage, but the ceiling, by the way, everything in the fake, so everything down on the ground is pretty rudimentary. right? Pretty basic. You got mountains and valleys and water and deserts and trees and crap like that. And because we can't fly, that's really what we're dealing on mostly. But the sky is exactly like what we do in video games. The sky is just a highly ornamental clock system that predates language. That's all it is. And it's for signs and wonders and inspiration, and basically it's also a big clock. So people, you can, back in the day, you don't even language. You can tell when to plant your crops and do other stuff just based on what was happening in the sky. Because back in the day, you had nothing better to do but to stare at the sky. And when everybody watched the stars curve overhead, they all drew the same thing. It's we're living in some sort of dome and the stars are on the inside.
Well, that's how they could create an Antikythera mechanism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
If you don't know what that is, anybody watching, an Antikythera mechanism is a device. It's like they call it the first analog computer that you can wind, and you can see all the movements of the constellations and the sun and the moon and the eclipses, and they can predict and everything with it. So
so that's where we live. The second question would be what's outside of this place. I think there's more snow globes. There's more buildings outside of this. Why would it be a one-off? If whoever built this, again, whether it be an ancient civilization, it definitely wasn't us, an ancient civilization or some sort of divine power. But again, you're kind of splitting hairs because one man's divine power is another man's high-tech civilization. And if a golden spaceship landed in the middle of Chicago tomorrow, there'd be two schools of thought. There'd be two separate groups of people. One would be like the science nerds. It's like, oh, wow, they do look like the blue people from Avatar, and try to get selfies. And the other group would be like, we must worship the blue people and start building churches. It's how it's been with our history. But I also think there's rules. I don't think you're allowed to do that until the very end because it changes things forever. And I know I'm stealing a little bit from Star Trek, but it's true, right? Star Trek is like the prime directive. Don't screw up the timeline of whatever civilization is out there. I mean, the last one of those later Star Trek movies where the ancient cultures saw the ship for all of 20 seconds, and it changed their religion. They just threw out their old religion. And they just started worshiping the spaceship that flew off. And it's like, that's what. Would it be that different now? Even though people would take selfies and do stuff? No, you'd have heavy religious people that would lean on it. So, and what's outside of the snow globes? Let's say there was a room full of snow globes. What's outside of that place? Well, I'm a big believer in dualism, which is you can't enjoy one thing or appreciate one thing without its polar opposite. So pain without pleasure, light without shadow, hot without cold, and so on and so on. So if this world is 99.9% conflict, which it is, I mean, it doesn't matter how beautiful, how powerful, how talented, how rich you are, you always have something to complain about. And I think that's really interesting about this place. You can try to be any of these things or all of these things, and still the richest people complain about stuff, and the most beautiful people complain, and so on and so on. Well, if that's the case, then whatever's outside of this world has to be the opposite, 99.9% unlimited, which is, a place that the time has no meaning. Not necessarily like a casino. I mean, time really has no meaning. You live forever, and you can do a lot of things, but like Einstein said, doesn't matter if you believe in the math or not. He said that imagination is more important than knowledge, and I think that was cryptic. I got what he meant there. I think part of this universe is built off of novelty, which is why we're here, in my opinion, which is whoever built this wants us to act naturally. And we're not talking like fake naturally, like a reality television show, right? Where the cameras and the producers are walking around, you just don't see them in the show. We're talking like hidden cameras, reality show, which are completely illegal. You want people, because again, human beings always act different when they're on camera. We've seen that has never changed since cameras were invented. Doesn't matter if it's a still shot or a news footage or whatever. When someone walks around with a freaking camera, if it's high end enough, people just do the goofiest stuff. They just act different. I mean, the smiles in their faces it's like, yeah, I was there when his car blew up. Are we going to be on the air tonight? It's like, dude, you just watched somebody burn to death. And so anyway, I think that's part of what we're at. We're part of, a show, the ultimate reality, thing.
The Truman Show.
The Truman Show. I mean, the Truman Show was along those lines, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But it was only for one guy, which is why I expanded on it in the clues, which was I said, look, what intrigued me was you could make that show basically as big as you wanted, as long as the you could control the people walking around. It was very limited, and I know they did that for script purposes, but to only do it for one guy was kind of a waste. And in hindsight, 20 something years later, we realized that show wouldn't be able to be on the air for that long because people would have gotten bored. It's voyeurism, but that's about it. Anyway. What else you got?
Well, I mean, the Truman Show, there's a part where, he's like, I want to be an explorer. And they say, there's nowhere left to explore, Truman.
Right, right. I mean, the show was kind of cruel in that regard.
Yeah.
Right? Where they really roped him in. But again, it was for plot's sake.
Yeah.
The show could have had a lot more people, which is why I kind of focused on the M. Night Shyamalan movie, The Village. That intrigued me more. Because the M. Night Shyamalan, The Village, where these kids were growing up in a fake town, in the 1800s with no technology, what I thought was intriguing was when the parents and grandparents died, no one's lying, no one's acting. It's just the kids living the reality of how they're told. And, you're told there's monsters in the woods, so they weren't going to be going and exploring. And think of how cheap they did that. But again, and then you've got generations of people. How would that be different from where we are now?
Yeah.
Right? You introduce a civilization, and I know we could go into how many times history's been reset, but
well, from a biblical perspective, which is normally where I come from, it's in the beginning there was a garden, and it's like you want to be in the garden. That's the best place to be. Is the whole idea,
right?
And there's the fruits and all good things available. That is freedom, and you could want to go to the outer edges and try to escape and transgress into heaven like Babylon, but that kind of backfired on them. Obviously, that's not a good thing in the eyes of and if the only way to pass through the waters is through death, right? And who knows what happens afterwards, right? Is kind of what you're saying,
right? Yeah. And thank you for bringing that up, the whole Tower of Babel thing, which kind of clued me into, it's one of the shortest stories in the Bible, and it's in Genesis, but I think it's so potent, which is the first civilization that God built here was too perfect, too good at what they did. They were unified, and they were, single language, single purpose. And worst of all, they figured out where they were. It's like, oh yeah, we're in a structure. Let's build a bridge to the ceiling and let's get out of here. Let's go meet God. And again, the line, from God, it's like, that he knew they were going to make it. It's like, crap.
Yeah, they can accomplish whatever they put their mind to.
Yeah, they're going to pull this off, and so it's like, all right, we got to revise it. The first reset, as it were.
Yeah, they divided the languages and scattered them. Yeah.
Yeah, and kill the tower and kill any idea that you'd have about the tower. And I think that every civilization after that, and I'm sure there were others. I'm sure there's been refinements along the way. Have been. I think there's been lots of efforts to slow everybody down, meaning slow down exploration. Slow down human achievement. I mean, look at this simple act of adding 3% salt solution to the oceans, to where, and that was damn clever. Which was, you make it to where you can't drink the water you're sailing on, because people don't remember back in the day, you only went as far as you had fresh water, and if you got to that halfway point, you had to decide if you could make it to your destination, or you turn back, because if you don't have fresh water, you're done. But if you could drink the water you were sailing on, like a giant lake, exploration is increased by 90-something%.
All right,
because you could just keep going.
We have a few questions in the chat.
Okay.
The first one was by Yokanan the Seeker. Any upcoming Flat Earth meetups here in Washington State?
I don't know. If there is, I generally don't orchestrate them myself. I usually I try to inspire others to.
What's the website that Karen B runs? What's it called?
FlatEarthFestivals.com.
And it would be on there, right?
It would be on there. Plus, you can also, again, it's easy enough to do a meetup. If you want to do a meetup, and I've done a number in Washington, with other people, just send me where you're going to go, where you want to happen, and I recommend a quiet sports bar or a coffee shop, something with a bigger room that we can kind of take over, and then I will make a promo on my channel. Karen will put on her thing, and if you make it, people will come. I guarantee it.
Next question April had was what, and this kind of goes back to what we were just talking about, but what are your thoughts on biblical cosmology? Are you approaching just on a science level, or what are your thoughts on
Oh no! I mean, if you were
creation?
listening,
Yeah.
I mean, come on! I made a clue that literally expanded on the Tower of Babel, which was very inspiring for me. I was raised born again evangelical. I fell away from the church when I got into tech for years, because I played video games and became a video game producer for a number of years and then taught proprietary software. And as you know, if you're hanging out with super geeks and nerds, church isn't a thing. It's like, Sunday? No, man, we're gaming this Sunday. Yeah, and so I gamed pretty much every Sunday. However, when I made the clues, I couldn't dodge the question of God very long. There were people all over the Christian community that were coming at me and says, you got to really address this. And so I literally made a clue called They Are Hiding God. And apparently that resonated really, really well with people because there were two channels that compiled the clues and they named them. One called it They Are Hiding God with the Greatest Lie Ever, and the other one called it They Are Hiding God with the Biggest Lie Ever. And it was just the flat earth clues, and I never even talked to these guys. But yeah, I mean, let's put it this way. We've had flat earth Christian conferences out there that have all told me the same thing, which is flat earth has become one of the greatest recruiting tools for the church in a long, long time, because it takes people from, like, say 92% to 98%. People that fell away from the church, there's like, oh, no. Because if it's flat, if you're living in some sort of building, then it was built by someone.
Right.
Now, at that point, you've got to decide who that building is, but is it God or did God subcontract the work? Either way, whoever built this is one step closer to knowing God's phone number than you are. So there you go. And by the way, I highly recommend whenever it says biblical cosmology, first thing I do is I recommend Rob Skiba's testingtheglobe.com because it is the finest single website for biblical cosmology that I've ever seen.
Yeah. I can address a couple of these questions. Frank says, have to correct this falsehood. Antarctica at no time has ever been locked down or off limits. What do you have to say about that?
Okay, well, you can look up the PDF is not hard to find. Look up the Antarctic Treaty. The PDF is everywhere. There's been a ton of videos on it. I was the first one to bring it up, which is Antarctica. Can you spend, let's say you're in America, can you spend 15,000 American and go down there and go on a raft and have your picture taken with some penguins and go along that little peninsula?
Yes.
Sure, you can. In fact, you can even go to the supposedly South Pole, even though it's magnetic. By the way, look up what compasses do in the South Pole. They're absolutely worthless. There is no magnetic south. Everyone down there will tell you that, which is so weird because remember, it's supposed to be a bar magnet planet. But the follow-up to that is you cannot roam freely. That's what the Antarctic Treaty is about. You try to organize any sort of exploration in Antarctica, I dare you. Try to go through the process. It will. Rob Skiba tried.
Lots of people have. Yeah,
a lot of people have. The amount of money that you have to spend, the amount of time and hoops you have to jump through are deliberate. In fact, there's money that you could spend, this massive deposit that you don't even get back if you're refused.
Yeah.
It just screams go away. So yes, Antarctica is locked down.
Well,
again, there's a reason
they patrol it as well. All the countries, who are part of the Antarctic Treaty, over 60 now, I think. 60 countries around.
And
they patrol the border.
Tell me why Antarctica is the only continent or the only place in the world where the real estate is owned by no one. Come on, we fight over property for centuries, and yet Antarctica, everybody agrees. It's like, yeah, nobody should ever own it. It's like, why? Why would you do that? I mean, and if it's resources, then why isn't everybody down for resources? There's only 5,000 people down there at any given time. It's all military scientists. So yeah, whatever. Yeah, not locked down. Do your research before you throw a question like that. Next.
How are you proposing? Retool science. Yes, guys, you are going to have to reinvent all science. So one thing I'll just recommend a channel. Wits It, Gets It would be the channel I'd recommend because they literally are debating astrophysicists and stuff. And if you want to learn about real science, not just pseudoscience stuff that you're taught like in school, then go to that channel.
Witsit is very good. One of the finest debaters I've ever seen. And if you want some more flavor to it, go look up Nathan Oakley in Britain. He's been doing it for years. He was doing it for years before Witsit got into it. The only difference is that he uses profanity when he tortures people. So Witsit holds back. Nathan Oakley, it's for adults only.
Yeah. So last question that I want to
Okay.
ask is your favorite proofs for
My favorite proofs. I'll give you you probably know them, or maybe you don't. I don't think I used them in the speech in Utah, but we'll find out. I can't remember it, to be honest. So there was a German television team that wanted me to debate a physicist from Georgetown. Unfortunately, because they know physicists, when you reach a PhD in an academic level, especially a physical science, your powers of speech are just worthless. I don't know what happens. You go into this wheelhouse, and it's just such tunnel vision, which is why they put Bill Nye on so many television shows, because Bill Nye is an ex-actor from Seattle. I know this because he was on a local television show, and I grew up watching him. So they said, come up with five bullet points, and we'll just record this, and we'll give it to him, and we'll just pass notes back and forth through class, and hopefully you guys will be able to do something. But you guys are never going to talk to each other directly because we don't want you talking over them. So five real quick. Obvious, the one that gets into most people, 80% of the flat Earth community gets in because of long distance photography. The curvature of the Earth is 8 inches per mile, at least for the first 500 miles, which is way past the limit of most photography anyway, so who cares? Which means that eventually things will be on the other side of the curve. But that's never the case. Cameras can see boats, they can see lighthouses, they can see all sorts of stuff way, way further than they should, and really HD technology changed the game. 30 years ago, you could have a $3,000 camera on your shoulder, you wouldn't be able to see crap. Now you can get a $500 camera from Walmart, and you can see stuff that's amazing. You can pull things back into frame. That's usually what gets most people. That's not my favorite. My favorite is gravity versus the vacuum of space. And I put this challenge out to anybody. In fact, I did for years, which was tell me why, like, for example, if you have a vacuum chamber above you right now, and you have a valve, and you pull that valve, what happens? It'll equalize instantly, violently. It's not like the movies. The movies slow everything down for creative license. And they will
Second
equalize. In
law
fact,
of
you may
thermodynamics.
black. It is a law of thermodynamics, and that's not my law, it's their law, which is pressure cannot exist to non-pressure without some sort of physical barrier. And so when you walk outside, why is our atmosphere still here? Why has it not been sucked off into the vacuum of space? And you say, well, because of gravity. It has to be gravity, otherwise we'd be dead. And I go, you mean the same gravity that couldn't keep the air from rushing upstairs from your living room right now? That same exact gravity? And again, the logic is, well, if it wasn't gravity, we'd be dead. And again, you're not thinking about it clearly enough. It's like, okay, so it's not a pressurized system, right? There's not a physical barrier there that could absolutely hold our atmosphere in. You're saying gravity is counteracting the vacuum of space. Again, the question I've thrown up for years out there, which is, what happens at the bleeding edge of space? What happens when our atmosphere ends and space begins? Tell me exactly what happens there. Because thermodynamics says it cannot exist. Which is why I put the challenge out, it's at least 6 years ago. I said, loan me any astronaut suit, right? Any astronaut. You can be completely supervised. Put me in a university vacuum chamber, pull the switch, tell me how I don't die. I was willing to put my life on the line. I still am. No one will touch it. Because, and again, with $4 worth of materials, because you can't trick me, and that's why it's never going to happen, is, because you could put me in a vacuum chamber and pull the switch like, oh, you're in a vacuum. It's like, really? And then all I have to do is hold up a bell and ring it. Now, if the bell rings, it's like, oh, it's not a vacuum, idiots. Right. Or tap water boils at room temperature in a vacuum, and any pressurized thing, just have a volleyball in with me. If it doesn't expand, well, you're screwed. Fourth would be that was the second one. Third one is the eclipse shadow. The eclipse shadow is too small. The eclipse coming up, running from Texas all the way to Maine on April 8th, for example. Lots of people are going to see it unless the weather sucks, and then nobody's going to see it. Which is, if the moon is 2,000 miles wide, why is the eclipse blackout zone, the circle, the black circle, it's only 70 miles wide? Wow, it's like a 95, 97% decrease. Why is it so small? And you say, well, it's convexing, blah, blah, blah. Well, it has nothing to do with the fact that we say that the moon is roughly 50 to 70 miles wide. It has nothing to do with that. Nope. which would, again, the shadow, when you walk by any sort of building, your shadow, I don't care where you are, your shadow is always actual size or longer. It never shrinks to nothing. Your shadow never turns into an action figure, ever, ever. Fourth one is the moon temperature, which I love so much. I didn't come up with it, which was, that was literally a call-in and one of my podcasts I did. And I laughed at him when he told me. He's going, the moon's cold. And I go, well, it's colder at night. What the hell are you talking about? Again, I've been in flat earth for at least a year, and I was laughing at him. And he goes, no, man, it's generating a cold light. I'm going, get out. And Rob Skiba heard this too, and he was one of the first people to test it. It's like, okay, if it's 80 degrees in the sun, it's 70 degrees in the shade. We all know it's cooler in the shade, always cooler in the shade, unless you're in the moonlight. Then it's warmer.
Yeah.
In fact, up to 13 degrees. Rob got a 13-degree swing. And you can test this with simple point-and-click $20 temperature guns that they use for engines and asphalt and stuff like that.
And it's all shadows. It's not just some shadows.
It's all freaking shadows.
It's
The moon is generating a cold laser light. And you're saying, well, and that's a real tech that we have. You can go on Amazon and type in cold laser light beauty products, and we have these all day long. And universities invented them decades ago. The question is, why is the moon generating a cold laser light? Does that prove that the Earth is flat? No, it does not.
Have you heard any explanation for this from science?
No, science won't touch it.
Yeah.
In fact, I am stunned nobody's done a dissertation on this in the last 9 years. That is a freaking gold mine, although I'm sure they don't know what to do with it. Because seriously, if you try to do your PhD on that and because that's a great original dissertation, where do you go with this? Because it completely destroys the relationship between the sun and the moon. Yeah. Because, okay.
Like, have you been to the beach and the sun shines off the sand and it comes off cold off the sand?
Right, exactly. Yeah, you're saying that basically the moon is generating a refrigerant light. Yeah, and I was the first one to do this back in the day, right. Which was because it's like, wait a minute, if you take a magnifying glass to sunlight, you can burn things, right? Mm-hmm. What happens if you take a magnifying glass to moonlight? It actually gets colder, which is even weirder, which goes along with the whole cold laser light. It's like, all right, fine. Again, doesn't prove a flat Earth, but
it's weird.
The moon's not reflecting the sun.
Yeah,
that's for sure. Which means they're self-illuminating, which means they're their own independent objects, which are roughly the same size. And last but not least, my favorite, which is the Van Allen radiation belt trap question, which is, are the radiation belts deadly? And you're going to say, first off, you're going to say, yes, they are deadly. I go, oh, okay. So the Americans that took, 6 round trips to the moon and back, using plastic and aluminum as shielding, even though the only 3 things that can stop radiation are lead, gold, which is twice as dense as lead, and then a whole bunch of water, which they use for power plants. How did the Americans get through? Nobody died. Nobody got radiation poisoning. Nobody got cancer. There's still 4 of these guys limping around today, right? Nobody died from radiation poisoning. And you say, then you come back, you're going to flip. And you're going to say, they're not deadly. I go, really? Then look up Orion Trial by Fire, which is on the NASA's website. And they said, we don't know, we're not going to send capsules through the radiation belt yet because we haven't solved the radiation problem.
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond.
Yeah. And by the way, watch Artemis. Well, again, Artemis is going to be kicked down the road and won't matter. But I mean, how is Artemis going to resolve that? Because eventually they figured out cruise. It's like, oh no, we're going to go around the moon. It's like, how'd you solve the radiation problem that NASA couldn't solve in 2014 when, again, the fact that NASA would even say that in 2014, we haven't solved the radiation problem. It's like, what are you talking about? Yeah, the Don Pettit. We go back in a nanosecond. It's like, wait, you already solved this in the 1960s. It was perfect. In fact, you've never had a failure.
You just needed tinfoil.
Yeah.
That's all you need.
No astronaut has died in a suit other than, Challenger and Columbia, but that's completely unrelated, right? Nobody has ever walked out, on a spacewalk and died. And why do you keep changing suits? Every suit that you make is perfectly fine. It's got a 100% track record, except for the one that you supposedly drowned in, which has nothing to do with the underwater pool that you're training in and passing off as the real thing. Anyway, so those 5 questions we threw at the physicist from Georgetown, and that was it. He just folded like a card table. That was it. It's like, nope, I'm not doing this. I'm out. And the Germans went away upset. However, in the physicist's defense, the reason why he folded was that when you reach a PhD level in your particular field, you are not comfortable asking any question that's outside your wheelhouse. Now, he may be able to ask the Van Allen thing, and he might be able to ask gravity versus the vacuum of space, but he can't touch long distance photography. That's not his field. He can't touch the moon shadow, probably, because it's not his field. He's definitely not going to touch the moon temperature, because he doesn't even know what the hell that is.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are my five that I throw out there, and I can't remember I can't remember what year I got an email based on those five questions. Or you know what? Again, trolls that are listening, you want to solve it for me? All you have to do is answer one question. Ready? Here we go. How does the spacesuit stop the astronauts from dying? Right? Don't tell me. And I made a clue on this. It was called For Want of a Nail, which was don't tell me about heating or cooling or oxygen and carbon dioxide or any of that crap. Tell me how a vacuum doesn't rip that suit to shreds.
Right.
And which is why I made the want of a nail, because if the suit doesn't work, then anything that ever showed the suit is a lie. That's it. Well, just real quick on a side note, why did the early NASA suits that they tested in the late 1950s and early 1960s, why were they all plastic and metal when they first started out? Because that's the only thing that even had a chance in a vacuum. And then they switched to a soft suit, and that was brilliant. Whoever did that, kudos to you. I hope you died rich and happy, because that was brilliant. All they had to do, and we'll end kind of with this, but if you have a follow up, that's fine. Which is, all you had to do was show the guy in a spacesuit, right? Put it on TV. And because the average person doesn't take any physics classes or any decent math, they didn't know. It's like, oh, it works. I have asked, I don't know how many people outside of America, right? America, of course, we're required to believe in the moon mission. It's part of our thing, right? It's what
Patriotism.
Patriotism. Yeah. Even if you don't believe in it, it's like wave the flag. America's the greatest. Yeah,
our flag's on the moon.
I love this country. However, I ask people, like, I'll just throw Sweden out there. I love using them. You know, big Swedish audience. It's like, why do you guys think the Americans went to the moon? Everybody says the same thing. It's like, well, because you put it on television, and your news would never lie about anything like that.
Nah.
And I smile and I go, man, you guys don't know us at all.
Definitely not during wartime. We would never lie about
no, we do
not.
No, we never lie. We come on. The Americans, if we can get away with a lie, the American government will do it. If it makes us look better, we're doing it. And it worked. Oh, yeah. Everybody we broadcast the moon missions everywhere, and everybody watched it. It's like, again, I get it. In the 1960s, by 1969, we were bulletproof. After World War II, we were the last hope of the world. And so we went for it. And everyone's like, yeah, America, they'll lead us out of this darkness. And it's like, okay. Yeah, because we're not going to take advantage of that. Right. No. Anyway, there you go. Anything else?
I'll add one more to your list, maybe.
Okay.
Whales can speak to each other like 3,000 miles away. And
sure.
You know how much curvature, like that's a crazy ton amount of curvature.
There you go.
And what happens is there's an acoustic shadow with sonar, so
right.
It can't go through rocks, it can't go through curvature, it doesn't curve either.
Right.
Audio
That's
waves
good. I hadn't
curve.
Heard that one.
And so I was listening to this submarine captain talk about how you could basically just hide on the bottom of the ocean if you never wanted to be detected. And that's what they do anyways, but you would just hide behind the curve, basically, and you would never, ever be detected. But he's saying that's not the case. And what actually happens is what whales use is they use a SOFAR channel. So there's a specific depth in the ocean that you can literally just like freaking shoot audio through and it'll travel thousands and thousands and thousands of miles to your destination. It's crazy. So
well, yeah, and again, because you're going through a medium of water, which is very conducive, especially to sound.
Yes, which at a specific depth, there's a SOFAR channel, and so it's really interesting stuff.
I mean, it's again how depth charges work. It's a medium explosive, it's a low yield explosive, but the medium of water is so dense that it amplifies the shock wave.
Right.
Compare that real fast to transmitting from the moon. Right. How did Apollo transmit 10 frames of color video a second and perfect two-way communication from the moon?
They didn't.
It had with what power source? It was running off a car battery. You can look this up. This is not classified. It was running a standard VHF transmitter that had maybe a range of 50 miles, and that's Morse code. right? 1969, we had our technology was awful, and you're saying, okay, well, it went up to the geostationary capsule thing, and that went 250,000 miles. It's like, through what? Through the vacuum of space, and then through the Van Allen radiation belts with no distortion?
And they're talking with no delay either.
Yeah, with no delay. Oh, yeah, those mistakes are horrible, by the way.
Yeah.
Absolutely horrible. But again, the average person, let's end it with this. The Truman Show line has never changed, which is, we believe the world that is presented to us. Because we don't naturally believe that people in authority would ever lie. But the truth is, at a certain level, the people in authority lie for what they consider to be the greater good, and they do it every single time.
Yeah.
Because it's for the greater good. It's like, look, if we have to lie, we're going to lie. So we're going to. And I think that's, by the way, it's how they'll get out of it in the end, which is if you want to let NASA off the hook, and by the way, think tanks, if you're listening to this, you've heard me say it. All you have to do is create a fake alien race or a real alien race, whatever this ancient civilization, and then just blame it on them. Have them say, oh, it's not NASA's fault. We made them do it for your own safety. Okay? That's it. That's all you have to do. And most people would be like, oh, well, okay then.
All right. People forget quick, so it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. It was awesome to speak to you, Mark. Sorry about all the technical difficulties.
Oh, no worries at all. I mean, I think you were recording most of it, so
I'm recording all of it.
Splice me or send me what you can.
Yep.
And I'll do what I can with it. But thank you. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was a pleasure for me. And thank you so much for coming on the channel. Again, go follow Mark on his channel if you're watching this afterwards on my channel. His channel's linked in the description of this video. And go to the meetups, talk to him in person. He's very easy to talk to, obviously. So
I try.
He tries. And till next time, thank you everybody for watching this stream. And sorry if we didn't address everyone's questions. We got a few comments that we didn't address, but
that's all right. They can always email me.
Yeah.
Or you.
Yeah, you've doxed yourself, and my email is also on my YouTube, so you can email me whenever. Anyhow,
cool.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. We'll see you around.
All right. See ya.